and welcome to another episode of Radiodell. I am your host, Chris Odell, and I am here to bring you good tidings from interesting people that I know. Today we have a very interesting person. His name is, he goes by Akira the Don. You may know of him through sort of his YouTube and musical fame. He did some very interesting electronic music mixes with different various philosophers in there. That's kind of his specialty. Everything from some modern folks like Jordan Peterson and Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, Jocko Willink, everywhere from folks like that all the way to these revived, well, not really revived, but brought to life in a new way, I should say, some of the Stoic teachings of Marcus Aurelius, and I'm sure he's going to do more things like that as well. So I go check him out for sure on YouTube, especially right now. We are currently in the quarantine times and everybody's kind of stuck at home. Hopefully you won't be by the time you hear or see this podcast. But if you are, he's doing live streams every day. They've been really interesting. But he's an interesting guy. Comes over from the UK and he's kind of made his way up in the world. And I think he's got a very different take on things. He's extremely creative, very well spoken, far more articulate than I could ever hope to be, and he makes some great music that I really enjoy. So I was looking forward to having him on and getting to know him a little bit better, and I hope you will enjoy it as well. Here we go. So, welcome to the show, Akira the Don.
Hey.
How you doing today?
It's a beautiful day to be alive. Look at it. Look at it. I got my windows shut right now, but I've got the same perfect blue sky as you. I haven't seen a sky this clear since I was a tiny little boy.
That's right. Probably the lack of extra planes and cars driving around doesn't hurt.
Yeah, well, that's it. There's no planes. There's no smearing. There's no extraneous stuff. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Side benefits to the quarantine times.
Yeah, there are many. Many. I'm really enjoying it. My son's never been happier. He's having the time of his life.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, my daughter doesn't mind at all either. She's, we get to sleep in a little bit more, and then she's just hanging around and gets to stay with us all day. And, I'd always thought about homeschooling anyway, so this is, a little try. Good stuff. So how I gotta ask? So how did you come with? Well, first of all, we should say. I'm probably gonna do a little introduction to the podcast. But what is it that you do for people who don't know you? How would you describe what you do?
Well, I make music. What I do is I sort of try and create soundtracks for every aspect of the optimal life, I would say. So I'm a club DJ, and in that context, I'm pretty much the best club DJ on earth. As in, we'll create the most transcendent, awesome party experience if you happen to be out at that time. And then I make music that will help you integrate. Well, it depends what you're doing. So I have instrumental music for when you're just studying and chilling, as people like to do nowadays. And then the other thing I do, which is the thing that's been getting a lot of attention lately, is the Meaningwave stuff. And that is a kind of psychotechnology I've developed, which incorporates the wisdom of the ages and meshes it with music, which is about the most powerful delivery system we have for integrating big, complex, or stupid ideas. And it's often used for very, very stupid ideas or very dumb stuff or teenage stuff. Pop music has concerned itself with the experience of the teenager since the 50s, and it never really grew out of that. Yeah. There's a whole other aspect of life which is kind of absent from music, and I've been focusing on integrating that into music by sampling philosophers or speakers or podcasters, and also more recently turning, for example, a 2,000-year-old Stoic text into a contemporary pop rap album.
Yeah,
I suppose that's
Yeah, that's I love it. Musician, but something obviously very, very beyond and different. And I love what you're doing. I think I ran into you first through Jordan. The tracks that you did with Jordan Peterson. I remember a few of us had a kind of a Jordan Peterson philosopher meetup group, and I remember the first time they came, we were like, you got to hear this thing, we're just going to throw it on in the background during the meeting. And it was awesome. And I started poking around. I'm like, hey, this guy's into some pretty cool stuff, and saw you doing things with the Alan Watts, and now you've got Joseph Campbell, and resurrecting Marcus Aurelius and stuff like that. And that's
I wouldn't say
that
I think that guy's immortal. I
well,
like, I put up the transmitter and received the spirit, but that motherfucker's out there doing stuff just constant.
absolutely. You might be the
It's,
first person to put him to some music though, I think. I don't know.
oh yeah, I've never heard of such a thing before. That was one
Yeah.
of those things because I was already doing the philosophy, sampling other people's voices, and then I did that, and at the end of it, I was like, oh, I guess this is another new genre, essentially. I mean, I've
Yeah.
never heard that done before, anyway.
No, that definitely
And then
opens.
you're like, wow, the potential of that. There's so much stuff to turn into epic pop songs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's great because you're reaching some people and some people who will know the work and just be thrilled to have it on these really cool tracks that you're doing and kind of just relax to them and get little pieces in there. And then there's other people who they're going to get introduced to all these great new people, philosophers and whatnot they might not have heard of, and that's a great way to reach people. I mean, even people who aren't that
Yeah,
old. Like Joseph Campbell, I mean, I've run into tons of people who have no idea who he is because it's just, if you weren't, it was before the internet was a big deal. And
exactly.
yeah, so it's really nice.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, I mean, one of the things I figured about Peterson was kind of, in a way, continuing that work.
Yes,
Was
right.
continuing Campbell's work. And Campbell, well, they're all kind of students of Young, right?
Mm-hmm.
Campbell was a big Young guy. But it's the same. People always ask me, like, how can you have Jordan Peterson and Alan Watts? Aren't they kind of opposed? But it's like they're both Jungian students looking at the same thing from just slightly different vantage points.
Mm-hmm.
Peterson, you could say, was kind of bringing back that Western foundation and giving that to a generation that didn't understand it and never had it.
Mm-hmm.
And Watts was doing the same with the Eastern tradition, which at that point wasn't known. We're at this point now where the Eastern tradition is almost perhaps better known by one generation than the Western.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
yeah,
and
certainly
Campbell
was.
was bringing all that together.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Campbell was just great. It's yeah. I mean, I love all those guys, and it is interesting, yeah, to see how Peterson's has brought in the Western like stuff, which for me was a whole new thing because I had kind of tossed all that out, so I was very deep into
Yeah,
Campbell and Watts and all that, and then it was like, I couldn't understand all the Western. I just went, no, that's a bunch of garbage because you get a bad interpretation of it or whatnot,
hmm
and yeah, and then when he came around, it was like, oh wow, it was so nice to have that reopened up, and to be able to have that other perspective to enjoy and open up to again.
we all did that. It was a couple of generations did that. It's that thing Peterson often talks about. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, which my
Right,
mum always used to say. I think there was a
right.
song. Well, there was like an old punk song, "Throwing the baby out with the bathwater." Who was that? Anyway,
I,
I remember that, and that always stuck with me. And that's what we did. That's what we did with our own culture. We just
yeah,
went. We saw the bits that we didn't like, so we said, fuck off the whole thing." While then simultaneously getting really into other people's that had the same problems as ours did. It's a
sure.
very fair thing. But now it's, yeah, I think that was one of Peterson's big jobs and one of the big things he managed to do in that little window of opportunity between 2016 and last year. Like, he managed to reintroduce that Western canon in a useful fashion. He managed to show the absurdity of certain things that were going on just in time. And now we're in a whole new world.
Yeah,
But we have that stuff. We have those tools that
yeah,
that these people gave us.
yeah, yeah. That's a wonderful thing, and it's great that you're getting that message out further and keeping it going. Because it's just, I don't know. I love that you're doing that. Especially, it's been fun to watch your live streams in these quarantine times. I mean, it just because it's people are stuck at home and you're out there and you're jamming and your positivity, but not in a, I don't know, not in one of those new agey ridiculous ways where people just want to gag, but it's like, wow, this is really good positive stuff. He's getting in on the truth, getting in on just really, I don't know, good inspiring things that reminding us how nice it is to be alive even in the darkest of times. So yeah,
Vibes.
it's very good.
Vibes. That was my realization yesterday, is
Mm-hmm.
vibes. And
Mm-hmm.
if politics is downstream from culture, culture is downstream from vibes. Therefore, he who controls the vibes controls the culture. You know what I mean? And that's what all a DJ does. A DJ is controlling the vibes on like a micro level. So the internet helps us to do that on a macro level. You got people like Scott Adams doing his thing, like with his audience, keeping them all chill and kind of and it's always this ripple effect, the butterfly thing. And so I'm doing my bit to keep the vibes at the right level. It's all vibes. That's Alan Watts' core thing.
Yep.
One of his core things. I'm just finishing up the new Alan Watts album right now, which is just incredibly prescient, the stuff he's talking about, and how it follows on from what I've just done as well. It follows that Campbell record and the Marcus Aurelius record perfectly, and expands on those things.
Do you realize you were going to be able to actually make full records out of this stuff? I mean, when did you start doing like your first couple of tracks in this style?
It's a thing, but I've always had aspects of this, and like when I was 16, just before I quit school, the last exams I did, the only revision I did was to take my notes and read them over ambient music and play it when I went to sleep, and I passed all my exams. So I was aware of the power of combining ideas with music from very early, and I've always made, as a hip hop artist, I was rapping and producing mostly, but I was always incorporating words in the way that rappers have skits. You'll have someone talking for like 30 seconds at the beginning of the track. I would do a whole track that was like that, or 2 whole tracks, or 3 on a mixtape. And then in the about 10, 15, 12 years ago, I was doing concept mixtapes that would have whole ideas, and I would sample people talking about these ideas and weave them together to create sort of like musical spoken concept mixtapes type thing. So I've always done this stuff, but then in about 2017 maybe it was, I did 1 track sampling Jordan Peterson called Be a Plumber. I got it in from DJing, and I had him on YouTube, which is what I used to do at 3 or 4 in the morning. I'd have Peterson on while I chilled out after DJ. And he just said that thing about, we need people to be, we need people to solve problems. We don't need people causing more problems. We need people and about be a plumber, but be a good one, and how that's useful. And I've always thought that, and he put it perfectly. It's like the thing with Twitter, you like a tweet if it's basically saying something that you already think, but they say it in a concise way. You know what I mean? Peterson was doing that, so I turned that into a song, and it was very popular. And then I was like, I could do a whole full-length mix of this. So I did, and then that went really well. And I was like, shit, this is the thing. I could do a whole bunch of stuff. I could do Jocko Willink, and I could do, and so I just started doing stuff, and then the actual speakers were seeing it and retweeting it. So then I got in touch with Peterson and asked him if he'd be into me doing an album of 12 Rules for Life, and he was like, yeah, that would be amazing. Love what you're doing, and it's just kind of went from there. The Joseph Campbell thing was great because I had this kind of it's like a story. I've got all these people that I want to get to, and these ideas I want to get to, and so it goes in sequence. I'll lay one because that's foundation for getting to the next point, which is foundation for getting to the next point. And the idea is you kind of integrate each album, and then you have that wisdom and skill set, and then you can understand the next thing better. So one of the things I was doing was working towards Joseph Campbell, and just as I was about to do that, I got his foundation got in touch with me and said, "Hey, we love what you're doing with the Peterson stuff. Would you like to do something with Joseph Campbell?" I was like, "Ooh, weird. You should mention that, gentlemen."
That's very nice. Well, it's good. So they probably gave you access to it. I remember I tried to upload a whole bunch of his stuff for you because I have a ridiculous collection of his work, But yeah, that's good. So at least you got the official blessing. They actually keep a pretty good protection on his stuff, whereas like Mark Watts, Alan's son, is much more liberal about letting people just do what they want to do with it.
Not anymore.
Not
anymore. That's all about to change.
Well, I don't blame him. I mean, it's it's been, might as well get have some control over that. But that's good stuff. So what's your, I mean, I assume you are from the UK originally, perhaps, or somewhere off in that region?
That is a correct assumption. Over here, people either think you're Australian or they get the British thing right, but they often think I'm Australian for some reason.
No, there's a slight difference in the accent that I'm usually good at picking up on, but then again,
I got a weird accent. I've lived all over the place, but yeah, I was born in the UK, born in the middle of the UK in the Midlands. I was raised in Wales. I left home when I was 16. I went running off around the country and around the world, and I've been out here for 5 years now.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. And by the way, I quit school right about 16 as well, so I tested out. But so
it's the right thing to do.
Cheers to that. Yeah, I think for a lot of us, it certainly is.
Yeah,
It's
any longer is just like damaging.
Yeah, unless you've really got a clear path and there's something very specific that you want to study that you can actually get better access to in school, I
Yeah,
can
exactly. You're
understand.
trying to be a brain surgeon or something, yeah, but like most stuff, you're going to be better off like real world learning and books and
Yep,
experience and putting that money that you would put into what is often a useless degree into starting your own business or something of that nature. God damn it.
agreed. Yeah, yep, that's definitely what I did. So yeah, good call, I think.
That's another great side effect of what's going on right now is everyone suddenly having to do that. That's been forced. And so
Yeah,
people are saying, oh, actually, this is great. This actually works, and I'm saving lots of time. And
it's true. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, even just figuring out how to work from home, I mean, hopefully people will appreciate the time and figure out how to structure their lives so they can, yeah, spend more time at home. Hopefully they enjoy hanging out with their wife and kids or whoever, or just themselves and want to do more of that.
I think a lot of people are, and I think the opposite is also true. Some people are going, oh wait, I don't actually like this person now. I have to spend time with them. But a lot of people are going, oh my God, this is amazing. I really like seeing my
Yeah.
children and like, wow, look at all this special shit that I'm completely missing. I gave
Yeah.
them to the government to raise, and like, actually, this is fun and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a nice thing. Yeah, I mean, I've been, doing my work from home for a long time, so it hasn't changed me a whole lot. Although I do enjoy having the kid at home. She's only in kindergarten, so we were starting off with just all right, let her go to school a few hours a week, and she, or a few hours a day, and she can see a bunch of friends and stuff, which is something that we wouldn't be good at if we were doing homeschool. But other than that, I keep saying, well, how many years before we definitely I think we'd want to be homeschooling anyway. So it's good to have the time, and it's nice to have her just here all day, and I enjoy it a lot.
that's honestly that's what we did. Hercules went to kindergarten, and then we brought him back and homeschooled him. But he still goes to like well, he doesn't now, but like he goes to like an after school thing to go play football with kids and stuff like that for a couple of hours.
Yeah,
So we
nice.
do. So you get the best of both worlds for
How's
doing
that been
that sort of
for
thing.
homeschooling? I mean, I mean, it's a little off topic, I suppose, but there's probably other parents that'll be watching this. I mean, how was that a challenge to get the information and to get to get doing that, or did you find it fairly easy?
I would say my wife does most of it, so I'm
Hmm.
not going to take credit for that. And it was a bit of a challenge, but all the information's out there. There's a ton of resources. There's a ton of programs you can get. There's lots of sort of systems you can subscribe to and get whatever lessons it is. So you can choose what you want to do. There's support. Uh, it's very doable. The main thing is, I mean, this would be a separate thing for Charlotte to talk about, but it's like get discipline and a schedule in there early, and you'll be
Yeah,
cool. Get
yeah.
discipline and a schedule in early, and you'll be cool.
Hmm. Good
It's
advice.
very, it's a very rewarding thing, and yeah, I mean, you're a grown up, so you can teach a 7-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. I'd
You know what I mean?
imagine that most
If you
people.
can't teach a 7-year-old, the only person who couldn't teach a 7-year-old really is a 6-year-old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, I think it can't be all that bad. Some of the smartest people in the history of the world were basically homeschooled or not schooled at all. So,
Yeah,
yeah, yep, yep.
exactly. And I mean, this is such a big subject, and you can go on forever. But the current school system is a relic of a very, very bygone age.
Yes.
It was set up specifically to create a certain kind of person for a certain kind of society that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
It just
absolutely.
doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for a long time. So that needs restructuring. And until that's restructured, I honestly think most people would be better off doing it themselves
Yeah.
for the sake of the children. For the
Yes.
sake of the children, Chris. Got to think about the children. Who wants somebody to think about the children?
That's right. Somebody, damn it. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, and to
Is
get
that your
back to
pool in the back?
it is. I'm a
Look
little
at you with
spoiled.
your pool in the back. That's lovely.
Yeah, no, well, it's a little cheaper here than let's say living in, most any major city in California. And we're not that far out, but we're just rural enough that I mean, I've got, cows and stuff right down the road here, a few blocks away if that and yet still civilization and it's been nice, but I will say that my
It
wife
looks
sold
nice.
a good deal of her slave stock money, her well-earned slave stock money to manage to get the pool put in. So we'll see. We
Gotta do
might
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hercules wants one in our next house. He's been making shopping list requests for the stuff he wants for the next house.
I bet. Yeah.
This time last year, we were all sharing one room, and now we're not. Now it's much better. We're still in West Hollywood, but Hercules is already right. Like, next house, I want a garden. I don't want a pool. I don't want a tree house. Like, yes, we must get you these things. We must. I always wanted a tree house when I was little, and I didn't have one. So if I don't get one for Hercules, I will have failed.
Oh yes,
as a human.
Yes, Kira wants the treehouse too. Yeah, it's the kids they want a lot. I have to be careful to. I tend to I suppose in some. I feel like I'm not spoiling my daughter, but then when I look around, I go, oh no, she's spoiled. She's definitely spoiled.
Well, spoil's a pretty hardcore word when you use it, because it's spoil. It's like ruin, destroy, like corrupt, all that. And there's a difference between like giving someone a wonderful childhood and giving them the tools they need to grow as a person and this, that, and the other, and like, filling them full of sugar or whatever it is. And people get these things conflated. We have all this guilt on all. It's a bigger thing in the UK, I think. You have this big class guilt thing in the UK. You're not supposed to get outside of your station, and you're not supposed to kind of like get much further along than your parents did, and if you do, you're some kind of a sellout. Which is one of the reasons I love America. America doesn't have that so much. America's got a much more. You're supposed to do better. You're supposed to stride boldly forward to destiny.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'd always heard that about Europe in general, that was kind of still something that was sort of in place and made things difficult, but I had no idea if that's really, a thing or not.
It very much is in the UK, but think about it, like, I had a little realization a while ago. Over here, the thing that everyone is told is like anybody could be president. So you've kind of got that as your subconscious expectation of your potential is very high. Even if even that's completely not true for most people, hypothetically, that's the subconscious expectation, and that manifests itself in a lot of stuff. You've got a service culture. You're nice to waiters, and waiters are nice to you. There's a tipping culture, all this type of thing. In the UK, we've got a monarchy. There's a queen. There's a level above which you will never get. There's a level that you're not allowed in. On a subconscious level, everyone knows they're a serf, and everyone knows that there's a level above them that they can never reach. Therefore, why even bother trying? Therefore, why be nice to waiters? Therefore, why tip? Therefore, why be nice to your customers? So on and so forth. And it manifests in that fashion. I think that's one of the major differences between our cultures.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that as a concept, that you've got that, sort of, when you're in that monarchy structure, even though she's mostly a figurehead at this point. I mean, it's still got to be there in that mindset.
Yeah, subconsciously, and that's where most things happen, right?
Sure.
Like, absolutely. Most of your life happens on the subconscious, and the deeper you get into life, the more that is true. You turn everything into a habit loop. Once you work one thing out once, the brain's like, okay, I know that, or whatever. And that's one of the major things, is like, as a British person, you're like, there is a level, I am not allowed in that level. I am down here, and if I try and do more, that's in some way either stupid or bad. And it manifests itself in all those ways, and it's one of the reasons I moved to America.
So speaking of different stations in life and whatnot, I could have swore that I heard, did you used to be, I know you've had some difficulties through life and some travels and trials, did you used to be homeless for a while, did I hear you say at one point?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So what, how did you get down to that, and then what helped bring you back to, finding some sort of path and purpose and things, or?
Well, that was just part of the path and purpose.
Uh-huh.
It was, I was in a sort of rural, I was growing up in a rural area, and I wanted to make music and go to the city where all the action was. So at the earliest opportunity, I left home. I tried leaving home. I started running away when I was 7. I first ran away when I was 7. Weirdly.
I only threatened at 7. That's impressive.
Yeah, at 7, I packed a bag and ran off and went down to a shop and shoplifted some food and all this, and tried a hitching. It was ridiculous. But so I left very early when I was 16, yeah. So between 16 and 18, between leaving there and moving to London, I had various periods of homelessness. At some points, I was sleeping under park benches and things like that. I did that for a while. I had some abandoned buildings. When I moved to London, I ended up living in a squat with some junkies for a while. They took me, and I was hanging around a station, and there was a guy selling travel cards, and he's invited me to come and stay at his squat, and they gave me a mattress in the corner of the squat that no one else was allowed to touch because they all had lice. So that was my little mattress. That was really sweet. But it was a weird situation because he spoke to me, and my knee-jerk reaction was to respond in a fake accent. Because I'd been doing door-to-door gas sales, and they tell you that regional accents do better. And I'd been reading Train Spotting by Irvine Welsh, which is written in phonetic Scottish. So I kind of developed this like fake Scottish accent that I could like switch on and off at need be. And the guy who spoke to me was Northern Irish, and for some reason I just responded in fake Scottish. Yeah. And then he brings me back to his squat, and his girlfriend is Scottish. And she's like, "Oh, where are you from?" I was like, "Oh, Falkirk." And I only said that because there was a Scottish band called Arab Strap I knew, and they were from Falkirk. And she said, "Oh, that's where my grand's from." I was like, "Oh, fuck." She's like, "Oh, whereabouts did you live?" I said, "Oh, by the post office." And she's like, "Oh, brilliant." So then I had to spend a couple of months living in this squat with these junkies pretending to be Scottish. That was really weird because, like I said, I've been reading Irvine Welsh's Train Spotting, so it was like I'd somehow manifested this weird, almost train spotting-esque existence. But yeah, there was a bunch of that. I used to sleep on or under benches, and I got very good at sleeping in weird places. And that's one of the things that served me well throughout my life, because I can always sleep no matter the circumstances. I get my sleep in. Whatever areas of my life might have been completely unhealthy or whatever, I can sleep. There was a period of time where I was staying with a friend and at his mum's, and he'd have to get up to work to go and work in the Coke can factory at 6 a.m. And we used to go clubbing. We'd go back to his at 3 a.m, get a couple of hours sleep, then he'd get up to go work in the Coke can factory. And I had a job in a record shop, but that wasn't until like 10 a.m. So I would go to a public toilet and go into one of the cubicles and just like wrap myself around the bottom of the toilet and get 3 hours extra sleep in before going to the record shop.
Oh man. So you had some serious stoic training.
Yeah, man. When I got my first job in London, I was homeless at that point, and I used to just like, I used to wash in the bathroom in the morning. And like sometimes I would just like hide behind my desk until everyone was gone and then just sleep in the corner of the office. Yeah. And shit like that. It was groovy.
That's sleep skill. That's actually, that's a big thing. Yeah, you know, so many people have problems sleeping, you know, so it's, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been incredibly useful in my life. Like people always think I'm like a decade younger than I am or whatever, and I'm pretty sure that's just down to the sleep thing, because every other aspect of my life was like not very healthy for most of it.
Right.
Like, my diet was terrible for years. I was like, exercise was terrible for years, all that type of thing. But I always got the sleep thing down.
Yeah, the older I get, the more I really appreciate the sleep. I've noticed how much better. It's just everything changes when I get a full night's rest, which is admittedly somewhat rare between either the kid trying to crawl in bed with us or my dog crawling on us. I refuse to make her sleep on the floor. It's my own damn fault. But on one of those nights where I almost get 8 hours of sleep and I wake up, I'm like, wow, everything feels different. Life's beautiful.
Right. It's so weird. It's like hypercolor.
Yeah.
It's tricky. And it's a tricky thing with the kid thing, because I get this, because like, you know, your kid climbs in bed with you and kicks you in the head and all that.
Right.
But like, it's also this beautiful thing that's not going to happen for much longer.
That's true. It's very sweet. That's why, I can't deny it too much. It's like, okay, you know what? I'll lose a few hours for this because it's something that won't come again. Yeah.
Yeah, really well. Like you'll be missing that fucking foot in the back of the head or that kick in the balls or whatever it is.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So what made you want to come to America? I mean, it sounds like you might have always had it in the back of your mind or something, but what got you over here?
Yeah, I always did want to. I always had a romantic fascination with the country because just so much of the art that I loved came from here. Whether it was the books, whether it was the writers, I was always really into like, you know, Tom Sawyer and shit like that. And then later, and like when I was like 15, I was really into Hunter S. Thompson. Like when I was 10, 11, my favorite music was like Ice Cube and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. So I always loved like gangster rap and metal and rock and roll and punk and garage stuff. So the music and the books and the movies and the whole thing I just had this romantic attachment to, which I shared with my grandmother. She always wanted to live here as well. She was into country music,
Oh,
and
okay.
she nearly lived here, but then they wouldn't let her. She like fell in love with a soldier, and was supposed to emigrate over here, but they wouldn't let her in the country because she didn't have enough money in her bank account or something.
Oh,
But now she's here. Weird.
is she? Oh, she's alive. Oh,
She's here
excellent.
now. No, she's here in a box.
Oh, okay. Well, one way or another, she made it.
She did. She died on Christmas Day, and then her ashes came over here, so that ended up pretty good in a weird way. But yeah, no, I always wanted to. And then there was the, like I was saying, that cultural aspect. And then I found I'd be coming out here. I first came out here in like 2004. When I signed my first record deal, I like blagged some money off my bank and got a plane ticket over here and arrived with like literally like $2 or something. And I had a microphone and a He-Man sword. And the microphone was in the He-Man sword. And I was just going around going to clubs, just rocking up and going running up to the DJ booth with my He-Man sword mic and jumping on people's DJ sets and rapping over the top of it. And within 2 weeks of being here, some weird set of circumstances ended up in the head of Interscope Records, Jimmy Iovine, flying me out to LA and offering me a record deal. It was very strange. It's very strange what goes on. So then I've been coming out here on and off, and I always found I'd be over here and like I'd be just walking along and a car would stop and someone would jump out the car and be like, "You're really cool. What are you up to? Who are you? Da 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 da. Oh wow, that's cool. Come and play my club or come and do this or whatever." In the UK, I'm walking around, and this literally happens, someone like stops the car and throws something at me out the window and shouts, "Oi, faggot." That's like, that's the difference, you know. And it'd be like, after a while, I was like, hang on. I was reading Charles Bukowski, and he had this story in Hot Water Music, and he'd like gone out to an orgy or something, and got his dick slammed in a door or something like that, and a bunch of awful stuff had happened, and he goes home and he goes to bed, and he wakes up at noon and he gets up and he takes a shit and he goes back to bed and he drinks some booze. He wakes up again a couple of hours later, looks around, goes back to bed, says, "Life is as kind as you let it be." And I was like, that's a good point, Charles Bukowski. Life is as kind as you let it be. I don't have to be in the UK constantly banging my head against a wall, and every time I have an idea, all people see as like the obstacles and why it's a bad idea or how it could fail. Or I could be in America where when I have an idea, people go, "Oh yeah, well, how could we make that work? Plus it's sunny all the time," and all that type of vibe.
Yeah.
So I suggested it to the wife, and we came out here and checked it out, and it was groovy, and we made it happen.
That's
I mean, it wasn't as simple as that. You have to get a visa, and you have to prove a case to the government why they should let you in and why you've got a skill that someone over here doesn't have, or that type of thing. And it costs a bunch of money, but we did it. We moved to Wales and got a little apartment, and I ran on the beach every day, and we saved up money and we applied for a visa and we got it and came out here. And, you know, for the first year, like I didn't have any work out here or anything. So for the first year I was staying on my friend's sofa while I got work together, and Charlotte and Hercules stayed in the UK at her mum's house in a broom cupboard in a little room. And then after a year, I'd got enough DJ gigs and things to be able to get them out here, and we got our first little apartment. We shared a room all together, and built that. And then 6 months ago, we got our first proper house, and Hercules got his first proper bedroom, and all that. Just 6 months ago. So yeah,
That's a great story, and what a great addition you are to the country. So I'm glad you made
thanks,
it over.
man.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
But
I feel very grateful to be here every day.
It's
I
good.
love this country. I'm very glad to be here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, particularly at this juncture in history. You know.
It's very good. But do you miss being able to get a decent cup of tea in a restaurant?
I don't miss anything. I don't miss. My wife does, but I don't miss. But the reason I don't miss is because I'm very much in the present, and I don't spend any time at all thinking about the past or the future, really. I'm very much engaged in right now and existing right now and taking advantage of right now as much as possible, and constantly refining that to be doing that more and more. The only time that things are bad in life is when one is not outside of the present. Fear only happens. Fear is just being outside of the current moment and hypothesizing bad situations or whatever, right? And that can be useful if you're trying to stay alive, if you're in some, but like for the most part, All unnecessary pain and suffering in life is a direct result of refusing to accept what is and existing outside of now, I would say.
Yes.
So I don't miss anything for that reason.
That's
Because
very
I'm here now, and here's cool.
So yeah, I haven't absorbed the teachings well enough that I wouldn't miss that. I'm attached to my nice strong dark cup of tea, but when I go anywhere outside of here, that's the one thing I can talk to Brits about. Usually, I go, "Doesn't the tea suck here?" And they go, "Yeah, what the hell's wrong with you guys?" You know, it's the only thing we can have a conversation about there. But oh man, that's good stuff. You sound like you've done a good job of absorbing or getting in tune with, all these things that you all this philosophy that you've been researching. Like I find that interesting. People who can really absorb that and embrace it, or it awakens them to it in themselves, because that's really kind of what we're doing anyway. But it's interesting to me, people who are very, very good at doing that versus some of us, probably me mostly included, who sometimes keep that reminder going. It's like, that's why we need stuff like your musical tracks. It's like, okay, get me back in, get me back in that alignment.
Well, that's the psychotechnology aspect of it, is the integration of it, and I compare it to that bit in the Matrix when Neo downloads and he's like, "Ooh, I know kung fu," and he's pulled that thing down. But if I'm sat here making an album, I'm listening to these things over and over and over and over on little loops, and it just goes in,
Right.
And that's the idea. So then the listener can have the same experience, but it's up to you how many times you listen to it and that type of thing. But I'm forced to. There's no getting around it. I can't not be doing that. So I can't not imbue the stuff. And I've also been very much a thing of I don't take advice from people, who are not embodying that of which they speak. And that can be pretty obvious. It's like if someone's telling you about fitness and they're obviously unfit or something, or whatever it is.
Sure.
And if someone's giving you some kind of relationship advice and their own relationship's a mess, or they're having an affair, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like I've always been very mistrustful of people who talk about things that they're obviously, I always think leading by example is the best way of doing things.
Yes.
To embody your message is the best way to deliver your message, rather than to preach your message, to embody it, So I've always been very much about that. But it's the same, man. I have to constantly remind myself of certain things, or like you have to kind of check in on yourself regularly, right? Like, am I still doing, what are my habits? That was one of the good things I got from Naval, to check in on your habit loops and make sure they're still serving you correctly. Or maybe you've developed some bad habits without even realizing it, that you could switch for some useful habits, or things of that nature. So you want to be doing an audit on yourself and your habit loops and these things, like with some regularity, whether you do it once a month or once a quarter or whatever. But that's a really useful thing to do, because all of us, anyone, you could think you're enlightened or whatever, but you're probably not, and you've probably integrated some. The problem is you're always integrating stuff.
Yeah.
And most of it subconsciously. So you'd be integrating some bad stuff, or some stuff that isn't useful to you, or some non-optimal stuff, or whatever it is.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And there's also, generations of ingrained habits and ingrained ideas, or mind viruses that could be there that you never even fixed in the first place. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, definitely, I mean, a lot of things have reminded me of that in life, but certainly having a kid, boy, did that really, that's an ongoing educational process for us both. It's I noticed a lot of bad habits that I had, and even just I think of myself as a very patient guy, and I don't get angry very easily. Like I have DMV patience. I could sit there all day. I don't care. I don't even need a device. I'm fine. I don't get upset about stuff. That's one reason I can play golf just fine, because it doesn't piss me off when I don't do well. I try to learn, but boy, like there were definitely times, and there still are some times, where like I find myself snapping at something that the kid does, where I just, chemical balance isn't right that day, and I start going into this mode of like, stop that, don't do this, what's your problem, haven't you, and it's you got to bring yourself back and notice that and go, wow, okay, all this work I've been doing to try to become, mellow and aware and present and loving, and then it's interesting, you can still slip, easily enough, so you gotta keep an eye on yourself, that's for sure.
Oh shit, yeah. And that one's a difficult one, because I as a father, it is part of your job to to deliver kind of, discipline, and to sometimes be stern, or like, it's the thing, say the way the thing Peterson talks about, like, don't let your kids do things that would make you dislike them or whatever, right?
It's a challenging thing.
Yeah, and as a father, sometimes it's like you have to put across to the child that you are displeased by what they have done, that is not a good thing that they have done or whatever. And it's like, there's not always an obvious way of doing that doesn't involve like some level of being stern or some level of sort of male severity, even if it's like a look or whatever.
Sure.
That is a difficult thing, and it's a thing that I think a lot of us are all constantly struggling with, because it's, I think, I was of the generation where my parents hit me. Mm-hmm. I was like the last generation where that was socially acceptable, because they didn't do it to my little brothers, but they did it to me. When I was 7, one of the reasons I ran away was like, it's like my dad like punched me, and it kind of like knocked me out. Well, he did, but that was normal. Like, and when he was at school, they were hitting. You were getting the belt at school, and then immediately after that, we went completely in the other direction, and then it went to this let them do whatever the hell they like thing, which resulted in a generation awash with sadness and nihilism and like no discipline. Mm-hmm. So then you have to there's there's obviously some midway between those things, mm-hmm. and we always overcorrect.
Yes.
And then we have to pull back. So right now, you and I are at the point where we're pulling back, and we're trying to work out like what the optimal mode of being is, what the optimal grip on reality in that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not obvious. It's
not.
There isn't a manual.
Yeah, and I grew up pretty much with not really a father figure, so it was like, I had stepfather here and there, but he was an asshole, and it was like, there was some great things about him too, but there were definitely, we'd get along fine now, did not get along back then, but yeah, so it's tough. A lot of my friends were like that too. They're mostly raised by their moms, and they don't really know how to, how to be that father figure and put bound. But then again, we could have had bad examples of fathers too, or so maybe that doesn't help. So yeah, we are definitely in a state of everybody's kind of trying to figure it out. Where do you draw the line between being a tyrant or a pushover, and make sure that your kid.
Yeah. And it's like, you want to be like, you're not there to be their friend, but you don't want to be. But like, you've also got to offer something that's kind of in that ballpark.
Yeah.
Because you want that kind of relationship, but it's a specific relationship. It's a father-son thing, and we had that down for thousands of years, and then we lost it because we threw the baby out with the bathwater in our postmodernist sort of like rush to be better than we previously had been. But we threw everything away, and now we're having to rediscover stuff that our grandparents knew.
Yeah. But we certainly failed that mission of going down and rescuing the good things while getting rid of the old corruption. Somehow that was that mission got lost for a while.
Well, we were deeply, deeply privileged, and we were in a hitherto never experienced in recorded history period of abundance and zero strife. We had like three generations that didn't have to go and kill people.
Yeah.
Every generation that came before, in their early 20s or whatever, had to go out and kill some other people.
Yep. Yeah.
Everyone had a war. We had a couple generations without that, which meant we got to concern ourselves with other things, and we got to be we got to stride forward and make great progress all over the place, to the point that we got to last year when people were arguing about things that already seem insane to regular people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really funny watching the sort of intersectional types sort of flailing around right now. And everyone's just telling them to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, like we got
we've got serious things.
Who
was it? I saw something on Twitter earlier. Some intersectional person was complaining, going, "The coronavirus is sexist. It's affecting women, this, that, and the other." And the comments, the replies are entirely, "Shut the fuck up. Go away. We don't want you anymore."
Yeah, it is bringing a little bit of shedding some light on the truth there. That it's definitely making people realize what things are extra silly and wasting our time. So
humans need problems. That's one of the things we need is problems, and if we don't have any, we'll invent some.
That's true. That's true.
And we'll always have to have that. People have to have some kind of adversity, some reason, some struggle, whatever it is. And if there isn't one, people invent them. Similarly, people need religion in some shape or form, because humans are religious animals and always have been. So if we throw that baby out with that particular bathwater, then we're going to have to replace it with something.
Yeah.
And that We saw that happen recently as well.
Yeah. I think
But
what you're doing in that department is, I mean, again, that's because philosophy and religion are very closely related, and sometimes right on the same level. And it's what you're doing with that to help people kind of get in tune with that sort of a new spiritual side, and whether or not they end up in a more traditional thing after that, that's fine. But I don't know, what you're doing is just interesting because it introduces them to these philosophies, and then they can kind of, I don't know, open up to a new form of perhaps spirituality. And I don't know, because there's something different. People are trying to find something, but nobody's quite. It's really hard. For Campbell's mentions, we have this inability to get into some of the old religions, especially in certain interpretations, because with the modern science and our mindset, it doesn't work. We have this cognitive dissonance that won't let us do that. So, but there's still so many. There's just these nuggets of gold and beautiful things, but we need a new way of getting there at least. And yeah, I think what
yeah,
you're
well,
doing.
we need a new mythology because, and that
Yeah.
doesn't mean, or well, we need our we need our own mythology, and we need to be able to integrate the former ones in
Yeah.
all of their usefulness, and need to understand that these aren't like things to be taken literally. They're vessels for the collected wisdom of the ages.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
we've just had this. It's I always think of this. It's the Christopher Hitchens period
Hmm.
when we were all atheists, and aren't we? We're so much smarter than those morons who came before.
Yep.
That's like a 14-year-old.
Hmm.
Like that was me when I was 13, 14. That's someone that's like the Manic Street Preachers or one of those sorts of bands. But it's like then you get through that and you grow up a bit more, and now we're doing that as a society and so on and so it's. And Campbell talked about that quite a lot. There was a split at one point. The church and sort of science and philosophy were intertwined, and at
Hmm.
one point they divorced, and it was actually the church who said, "Piss off, science."
Right.
Weirdly, but we have to bring all these things back together, and
Yeah.
it's part of what I'm doing with the streams, the daily streams thing. Is that's kind of like a church sort of a thing. You can all get together and congregate and worship and have a kind of shared sort of spiritual experience with some music that you all enjoy and some ideas that are bigger than the individual, the atomized individual that is you. Some
Hmm.
ideas that are bigger and belong to all of us. Here's the other thing we've had. It used to be, this was another recent realization, the printing press kind of fucked everything up. Because prior to the printing press, our stories, our shared mythologies were truly shared. We would tell them
Mm.
to each other, and
Right.
everyone would be involved in it. I'd tell you the bit of the story I remembered, then you'd chip in with your bit. Then we'd all join in on the bit we got together. People walk around with the entirety of Beowulf in their head. Then the
Yeah.
printing press comes along, and then it atomizes all that, and you do it on your own, and it's
Yeah.
not shared anymore. And then corporations come along and buy the stories, and suddenly Snow White is owned by Disney.
Yeah.
That's not even yours anymore. And if you're like, say you're so our modern mythology, you say Star Wars.
Hmm.
That's a whole generation's modern mythology. That
Yes.
was Campbell worked all this stuff out, and George Lucas put it in a story deliberately, and that
Hmm.
became the modern mythology for a bunch of people. Then Disney buys it and reshapes it in their desired image and perverts it, and
Yeah.
it upsets people rightfully, and they don't even necessarily know why they're upset.
Hmm.
Some of them go, oh, it's because they're putting intersectional politics in it or whatever, but it's way bigger than that. You
Yeah.
perverted a pure mythology, and it's not even that anymore.
Yes.
And what happens is because we no longer have the right to be involved in that mythology, people start trying to do their own fan fiction or their own stories or whatever, and then they get Disney blocks them and shuts them down. So people try and talk about it on Twitter just to try and be involved in their mythology, and they get shut down and called bigots and this, that, and the other. So you get a
Right.
situation where people aren't able to engage in their own mythology anymore because it's
Hmm.
been bought and sold by someone else, and they've been denied access to participation in it. So for the next period, we have to get to a situation where we can all participate in our mythologies, in the creation of them, in the execution of them.
Yes. Very good.
So I don't know
And
how we're going to do that, but that's something we have to do.
well, I think you're certainly a part of it. And I've got to ask, how did you're very good at getting your opinions across clearly and speaking. Did you have any background in that as well, or some experience in that, or is it just something that's come naturally to you?
Oh, rapping, you know,
Ah, well, there you go. Right.
rapping, uh, probably rapping, probably did that, and And writing, I've always, writing. I've always written. My earliest memories are like trying to make music and making comics. So I used to draw comics, and then in the back of the comics I would draw when I was like 11, and I would photocopy them and sell them at school. Actually, no, I started at 7, but when I was 11, I was making them and sending them to America, and I would write music reviews and stuff in the back, and I would write stories and poetry and songs. I don't know. So I've always written, and I've always performed, and I've always spoken, and just over the years you get better at that, I guess. And I've always read a lot. I quit school early, but I've always read a lot. Yeah. And I've been always constantly sort of learning and trying to learn and all that. So yeah.
Very good. Your articulation skills are excellent. Something I've always admired in people. That's I have I have a lot of things floating around in my head, but I still struggle sometimes. I open my mouth and I go, "Oh, I've got this brilliant thing to say," and then it's like, "Oh, no, that's not what I." It's tough to get it all out properly. So that's one of my personal works in progress. Actually, part of why I do the podcast. But
well, that really helps. So everyone doing podcasts now is brilliant because that's teaching everyone these skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you monitor, and it makes you monitor because we've all done this. After I was doing podcasts, I was in 2010. I had a internet radio show before 2000. Before the term podcast. In 2000, I had an internet radio show. Then you listen back to these things and you realize how often you say and
Oh yeah.
Or how often you're talking over the other person, or all these various things. And so that teaches you to get better at that. And I'm still not even close to what I need to be, but all of us doing this now, and people doing live streams and podcasts, is teaching everyone all these skills. All of us are becoming so much bigger, and so many of us now have skills that were previously only accessible to a very elite group of people. And this is now being distributed across the masses and to the normies. The normies can all now make songs, make movies, make TV shows, communicate, ingest big ideas, watch lectures, go to university, essentially.
Nice. I like it. Well, that's good stuff, and you're certainly, again, a force for good and a big part of that. And I know you are. You've got a time constraint here, so I won't take up any more.
I've got a window of opportunity to get back into my old studio and get some of the soundproofing stuff out of there. So I've got my homies waiting outside, and I'm going to go get my soundproofing panels. So this new room that I'm in, I'll be able to finish this Alan Watts album.
Great. So well, I look forward to watching the live streams. I look forward to hearing the new album and everything else that you're doing. And just from myself and everybody out here in the world, thank you so much for what you're doing, and keep it up, man.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, we will keep supporting.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Radiodell. If you want to find out more about the show or myself or our sponsoring company, you can head on over to chrisodell.com. That's CHRISODELL.com. And just a little word about our sponsoring company, since it allows me the time and then the freedom to be able to do this podcast. That is a company that I started back in 2007. It is a hemp gear company. And what does that mean? Basically, we have bags and clothing and all sorts of other different accessories and fun things made with primarily hemp textiles, which are antimicrobial, breathable, of course, very sustainable, but we don't get too hippied out about it. It's just good, functional stuff, good for you, good for the planet, whatnot, and we just try to make some really interesting and useful things. So I hope you go check that out, because that does help support the show. That's at dsgear.com, dsgear.com. And like I said, you can find a link to that over at chrisodell.com as well. Thanks again for joining us. Be seeing you.